Hey guys, this is Max with Priority Bicycles. Today we're going to talk about how to pick a sleeping bag for your bikepacking setup. So when it comes to sleeping systems for bikepacking, there's a lot of different options. You can go with a quilt, you can go with a sleeping bag. In both, there's many different styles. There's also sleeping pads, pillows, lots of elements to this, but today we're going to focus in on just sleeping bags. I'd recommend by starting with 3 things to think about when you're considering what sleeping bag you want. I'd consider if you're a hot or cold sleeper, we'll get into what that means in a second, the temperature it's going to be where you plan on going bikepacking, and the pack size of the sleeping bag. So some people when they sleep are prone to being extremely cold. They need to be warm. It can provide a miserable night's sleep if you're too cold. Conversely, if you're a hotter sleeper, that's the kind of person that likes to stick a leg out from underneath the blankets at home and make sure that they can regulate their body temperature. So when you start to research sleeping bags, you're going to find that they're rated for temperature ranges, like maybe 30 degrees to 45 degrees or something like that. At the very least, it'll have a minimum temperature rating. I really like to use REI as a resource because a lot of the sleeping bags will have what they're rated to go down to, but then also some anecdotal information about what they feel the comfortable temperature would be. So when you do your research, just use multiple resources, check out those numbers, and make sure the lowest temperature that the sleeping bag is rated down to matches the climate that you'll be bikepacking in. So I personally would rather run a little bit too hot while sleeping than too cold. If I'm too cold, I'm just miserable all night. So some sleeping bags are going to have zippers where you can have a vent. Some sleeping bags are going to have places where you can open the bottom of the toe box to let your feet out. I don't want any of that. I want a sleeping bag that's going to be fully enclosed. I even have a hood on mine. And if I run a little bit warm, that's okay with me. I'll be comfortable, I'll sleep well. I don't want to risk being too cold. But if you sleep the opposite way and you want to make sure that you can have proper ventilation, check out a sleeping bag that has something like vent options. The next thing you want to consider is the temperature it's going to be where you're going bikepacking. I go bikepacking a lot here in the Northeast, where it definitely gets pretty cold in the winters. So I like to choose a sleeping bag that has a hood that's rated for probably temperatures down to about 30 degrees or so. I don't bikepack through the winter, but definitely well into the fall. So take into consideration the temperature in your area. Along with that, you might want to consider some creature comforts that come along with the sleeping bag. Mine, for instance, has an elastic on the bottom that attaches to my sleeping pad, or a place to put your pillow. All of this is going to secure you in there and just keep you a little bit warmer at night. If you've been following along on this video series, you'll know that I'm pretty big on making sure that everything I bring on my bikepacking trip has a reasonable pack size. Now, I'm not the kind of person that's a total weight weenie. I don't need the smallest, thinnest things possible, but I'm 5'7". I ride smaller bikes. I need things to pack down to a reasonable size for them to fit and come along with me. So when I'm choosing a sleeping bag, I don't want one that's going to be super bulky. I would shy away from anything that's meant for car camping. If it's meant for backpacking, just look at the specs really carefully. You want to make sure that you can find the specs for both what it will be when it's in a compression sack, but also preferably if you can find what it's going to be when you just stuff it into a bag, that's ideal. I never pack my sleeping bags in a compression sack. I just shove it into the bottom of a dry bag because it takes up all that dead space and it'll pack down even smaller. So those are the 3 main things I like to consider when I'm looking at a sleeping bag, but there are a few other elements that I will look into as well. I do a careful check of reviews. I want to make sure that the sleeping bag is durable, that it's going to last. I treat my gear well, but I'm also not super dainty with it while I'm out there in the field. So I want to make sure that the sleeping bag can handle a little bit of abuse. Also, sleeping bags have different kinds of fills. That's going to provide different warmth, different weather resistance, and also there's some ethical implications of that as well. So make sure you consider that and get the fill that works for you. So I hope you found this video helpful for a starter's guide to looking into sleeping bags for bikepacking. If you want to see my journey towards turning the 600HXT into my perfect bikepacking bike, we'll put the playlist somewhere above my head, right here.